Hello and welcome. Welcome, everyone. My name's Eric Wilson, Chief Growth Officer at New Silver. And for those of you joining us for the first time, New Silver is a private lender focused on helping real estate investors finance fix and flips, ground up construction, and rental portfolios across the country. But today, we're not talking about financing terms, we are talking about AI. Us and just about everyone else. AI has been the topic of the year, it's been the topic of the decade, and I don't suspect that's going to be changing anytime soon. And today we are very fortunate because we have Jack Haas with us. Jack is an active investor himself, and he also works with Real Deal Crew, his company, to streamline operations for real estate investors. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jack, who will introduce himself a little bit. And we're going to keep this very conversational. So please, drop your comments in the chat on the side. We'll answer as many questions as we can, and we will get started.
Well, I really appreciate everybody's time today. And I'll do a quick introduction of myself. I am the founder and real person at Real Deal Crew. You can learn a lot at realdealcrew.com, including my podcast there. But I flip in the exciting world of the Fargo, North Dakota market. And I know that might not be the most exciting place in the world, but it actually pays the bills. So, and we are going to be talking about how I leverage AI today, not only in my real estate investing, but as Real Deal Crew, and how we might implement some of these solutions and hopefully give you some ideas as to how they can actually work in your business. One of the things that I'm going to point out is that, over the next 30 minutes or so, please don't hesitate to throw a question or comment in the chat window. We can try to answer some of these as we go. It always seems to be a better environment and a better situation if we can try to make a direct impact to who's on the call here today. So one of the big things that I hope that everybody takes away from this today is that, two things. One of them is the fact that AI isn't replacing anyone in real estate investing. If it does any kind of replacing, it's going to be outperforming the others that aren't actually leveraging this technology. The other thing is that we are in a situation right now where AI is one of the most revolutionary technologies we've seen likely in our lifetime. I'm going to age myself a little bit, but the last time we've seen this type of disruption is when the internet was available to us. So when I'm talking about Claude versus ChatGPT or vice versa, there isn't a better use of $20 a month subscription that you're going to have and the output that you have here. So the investment of $20 a month is probably the best and cheapest, lowest bar of entry you can get in here. And there's a reason I'm going to tell you that you should at least be subscribing at that level. So we're going to be talking about ChatGPT versus Claude, and there's a couple things here that I wanted to call out. One of these is that up until recently, ChatGPT was in the lead, and unfortunately for them, Anthropic now has seen a tripled usage in the first half of 2026 alone. And we can I'm not going to go into the political issues around all of that, but there are some reasons that we're seeing that, especially when it comes to operations and real estate investing and everything in between. So I'm going to kind of break down some things here, but by the show of hands, who is using ChatGPT and who's using Claude right now?
I know I see a lot of people saying, yeah, but I'll say from our perspective at New Silver, AI has changed the way that we use business. And for us, it's both. It was ChatGPT a lot at the beginning. The past few years, that was what we kind of used exclusively. That's what I used in my business. And then Claude seemingly from my standpoint came out of nowhere with how much functionality it had. So for me, it has definitely transitioned from, ChatGPT using kind of like as a brainstorming tool into Claude being like the functionality piece that we implement.
You're kind of spoiler alert, Eric. That's exactly where I was going to be going here with this. Uh, that's exactly the situation that I'm seeing, especially at the moment. And there's going to be still some very strong benefits, but what I think here is interesting is that when you look at the comments right now, there's a good chunk of people that are saying both, and that's actually the camp that I fall into. I leverage both in many situations, and I know that tallies up to a whopping $40 a month. But I find that there is definitely strong uses for both in the real estate world. Um, ChatGPT, OpenAI's flagship model, we're up to 5.5 as the recording of this episode. Um, where it's going to excel over Claude is frankly the image generation is a big aspect of it. And with this latest drop, the image generation has gotten far better. In fact, I would say that it even rivals Gemini Nano Banana, if you've heard of that type of model, where that was really the flagship when it came to image generation. ChatGPT is right there right now, and it folded its image generation right into the core app. And so that's actually one of the other things that I don't have listed here, but you're going to find that the core app for OpenAI is likely kind of better suited if you like to work in that particular window versus Claude. Claude has a tendency of liking to keep things in silos, and if you go into its app, you have a chatting interface, a co-work interface, and a coding interface. None of those three currently, and now they're adding designer in there. None of those interfaces actually communicate with each other like they do in ChatGPT. So it's a great way in which to. So I kind of make ChatGPT as kind of like a Swiss Army knife. It has a lot of functionality, and it provides that massive plugin ecosystem. It has a voice mode. It does web browsing on your behalf, and it's a tried and true solution. Claude, on the other hand, has the different ability around long document analysis, nuanced writing tone. So it actually has learned. It does a better job kind of finding my personal voice versus it just kind of spitting what I call AI slop out. Um, Deep reasoning and logic. It does projects, that persistent memory, and I have a tip here that I'll be sharing regarding that persistent memory to take advantage of in projects. And then this is the one that I prefer most of my work. And I'm going to say for those that are interested, when it comes to coding, I actually use them in parallel. Claude has been becoming more and more that tool that I don't want to call it imaginative, but when I give it a direction, it will figure out the path to give me to a minimal viable product, an MVP. Unfortunately, it will also break the rules in getting me there, where ChatGPT then becomes my senior engineer to validate the code and to just kind of harden the app or the infrastructure a little bit. So it's just one of those situations and good paradigms.
So Jack, if we have investors on this call who have their own real estate business and they're currently, entrenched in their business and they've been wanting to get into AI and they just haven't actually implemented, between the two, is there like, one, thing that you would say like moves the needle and would be like the quickest thing to implement in their business as far as like, you said image generation with ChatGPT. My mind goes to, and I've seen people doing this is, rehab renovations, picture of a kitchen, and showing it with new finishes.
Yeah.
With Claude, he's put long document analysis there, reading through leases, some of those things. But like, where do you think would be someone that could like start with one of these?
Well, if I'm going to say if you're going to have to pick one and you're just starting out, I'm always going to tell people to start with ChatGPT just because of the Swiss Army knife nature of it, and then they can dabble in the image generation and a few other things. Um, However, when it comes to the actual operations and implementing things to, co-work in Claude is pretty powerful. You can point co-work to your Gmail account and have it start auto responding and doing a few other actual tasks, so you can start to treat it like a virtual assistant. And I know that's available in ChatGPT as well, but I think Claude actually does a better job at it. And Claude actually has plugins for popular Office apps, such as Microsoft Office, where you can plug Claude in there and it actually can help you create PowerPoints. It can help you create a Word document and the like. And adding plugins to any of these interfaces, you can actually go into ChatGPT or Claude and just simply ask, "Hey, I'd like to integrate you into my Office apps. How do I do that?" And it will actually just tell you exactly how to do it. So, and that actually leads to what you were just talking about, Eric, how I find that these kind of stack up. ChatGPT, it's great for quick research, image generation, browsing the web for comps, doing some brainstorming sessions. And in fact, ChatGPT has my what I call as my board of directors, where I've set up uh, virtual versions of Alex Harmozy, Russell Brunson, some of these people that I read and follow some of their advice and books. I've trained those Chat GPTs on those individuals' books, and it's like, hey, I'm working on this. How would Alex? And I even call it Alex. How would Alex respond to this? So it's just a great way in which to, I have like I said, a virtual board of directors, if you will, that's housed in ChatGPT for that purpose. Claude, I have that writing SOPs, and I'm going to get to that here in a minute. But SOPs are one of the banes of most investors or business owners in general. You'd be surprised how many people don't implement SOPs. But with AI, it's likely one of the most painless processes you can actually do these days. Because when you sit down and actually just record how to do something, whether it's video or audio, and send it into Claude, it can actually draft you an SOP pretty quickly. So just vomit the information into these algorithms. It can actually get you a long way. There's always going to be a cleanup, but it'll get you 90% of the way there. Analyze deal docs, I use it a lot for that. In fact, I have Claude, a particular agent set up now, in which I was underwriting a multifamily property just yesterday. And in my market, we have a number of small communities around us. So I have AI not only analyzing the property details, but it will actually go online, scrape the information. It will determine the rent roll, the nearby comps. It even found a property right next door, pulled the comps from that property for rent. Details on the public information, the sale history, everything associated with this. And then as I learn more, I just keep adding more context to that project, and it generates a report for me and my partners as an underwriting document. The reason I'm bringing this up is to get it to the level that I have it today, which is a multi-page report. It would have literally taken me days, if not weeks, to get some of this information together. And then at a certain point, you got to make a decision. Let's run with it. So now it's giving us a far more complete picture, far more detail. And in fact, in one situation, I actually have it generating two reports, one for us internally and one for the seller facing document. And then we give it to the seller to justify what we're offering. And in that particular situation, he actually said, well, our offer didn't work out for him. However, if we underwrite deals to this level, let me know, because he'd be interested in investing. So it was a way for us to just kind of show our expertise regarding our underwriting efforts.
Are you finding that you're replacing, other software subscriptions that you would have had? Like I know, like, CoStar, pulling down comps, and, doing that. It's very similar to what you're talking about. I've heard from a lot of different investors that they've just started to end subscriptions. And once they get to a certain point, like they are managing their entire business within these AI ecosystems.
Yes, in fact, I'm been replacing entire CRMs, um, because if you think about it, and I hate to pick on Salesforce, but I'm going to. Salesforce, look at how expensive some of these CRMs can be, and for the most part, most people are using just a fraction of the functionality there.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much effort at all to actually build a custom CRM at this point that fits your exact business, your exact needs. And you're looking at a certain point, if you deploy it to a service like Vercel, you're just dealing with the hosting costs at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're running a business, I mean, every dollar matters. So if you can, it's not always about, getting new deals in the door, but also shaving the expenses and making things more efficient. And that's where I feel like, teams are winning with AI.
Yeah. And then what I actually think, what I've found too, is that I'm especially finding ways in which to make better use of some of these tools.
Mm.
Like we've been dabbling in pay-per-click. Pay-per-click is one of the more complicated things. Like if you ever logged into Google pay-per-click, it's just a mess. I just hate going in there. But you can attach Claude or something into your browser. It can see what you're looking at and guide you through on how to set up a pay-per-click campaign
Yeah.
properly. It's pretty crazy. And then one of the things that I wanted to say, where I am using both, and we kind of touched on some of this, is the drafting the seller outreach, because I will find that when I run a script or something through both, I'll get different answers, and I'll actually copy and paste uh, part A out of Claude and then part B out of ChatGPT to kind of generate a particular flow. Um, Analyzing market data, refining follow-up scripts, that type of thing. Which one between ChatGPT and Claude build a CRM best? Well, I have definitely would always go with Claude when it comes to that. Although I've seen and I know of a number of actual developers who actually prefer ChatGPT for that for an app build purpose at this point. But Debbie, if you're ever interested, you can always hit me up, and I can help you. If I've been helping a couple people set up a dev environment, like a agentic vibe coding environment, and it takes roughly 5 hours. We can go through that. It is an engagement, but I can show you how to do that type of thing. So where AI moves the needle for flippers, and we're gonna start here because that's what I do, and that's kind of a lot of the stuff that I use to solve my own problems. Um, Prompt AI to score incoming leads by motivated sellers. Every call that comes into my system gets recorded, and it generates a transcript, and then the transcript is then fed into an AI to score the probability of how motivated that seller is from a 1 to 10. So this now takes roughly 30 seconds. I'm not burning time on low intent leads anymore when it comes to people calling in. I can kind of go into a little bit more detailing on that, but Kyle, you're asking what about in analyzing deals, either heavy value add renovations or ground up new build? This is actually kind of where things get really fun because and I'm going to that is deal analysis notes. Not only can you paste the data that you find into ChatGPT for that, but I actually walk around a property when I'm walking through and actually speak out loud what would need to be done. And we've done hundreds 100+ flips at this point. Um, with experience, we kind of know what we're looking for. But we use a heavy, medium, low type of setup when it comes to running our value add renovations and our numbers. And but when I'm walking around the house, I'm actually speaking to my virtual assistant, if you will, on my phone and adding that context to the underwriting process. And sometimes I will even while I'm at the property, when I'm done recording, I will ask Claude, what am I missing here? Anything else I should check out while I'm here? And then it will prompt me back and ask me some questions for me to check out while I'm at the property. So adding that additional context is the key there. And then I've trained it to know roughly, because it's going to be cheaper for me to do a rehab in Fargo versus somebody in California. So having that locality of not only what the contractors cost, but what the materials might cost is actually the key to unlocking some of that information. I hope
I'll
that.
add on to that. Another tool that just helps you really analyze these deals. A lot of us, right? We've been using Excel for years. We have deal analyzers. We have models that we're used to, we're familiar with. Claude also has a plugin in Excel. It's just Claude in Excel. It can understand your model. It can understand how you've been underwriting deals in the past. So when you're going through and walking a property like Jack was just talking about, you can then go in and it can populate your rehab budget. It can populate sort of the inputs that you're gathering as you're walking the property. And that data entry that used to be manual, and we used to go into an Excel and then type it in and then try and play with the model, that can all be streamlined. That's massive time savings. So Claude and Excel, that's something that I would recommend everyone play around with a little bit if you have an existing model.
Yeah, in fact, one of the easiest ways to do it is if you go into Claude or ChatGPT for that matter and add your Excel file to your project folder, and that becomes context for any chat that you have in that project. That's a game changer as well.
That's great.
So some other things that I use this for on our flipping is the seller outreach scripts, like I said, but the lead to speed has become a big one for us. As we know, if we don't answer a phone call within or answer somebody within 60 seconds, they've moved on to the next buyer. So my whole system is set up to get them to feel like that they are being handled and handled professionally, and they know that they don't have to call the next person. So even if I'm not available to answer the phone call, I do have an agent not only answering the phone call and talking to them, but it then follows up with a text and a voicemail drop and a few other things so they know that something is happening. Yeah, that's true, Eric. You can actually have that build a model if you need to have a good starting point. The only thing that I'm going to point out is the fact that people might have heard of the concept that AI hallucinates, and I'm going to tell you that that's actually what happens is that when you experience hallucination and get wrong information, it's likely because AI hasn't had the necessary context to provide you the correct information. So it starts to put things in there as a filler because it wants to provide you an answer. The So where Claude excels that I've definitely found is that in one of my project files that I've added or the context that I give, if I've told it to, if there is information missing, ask me versus giving me filler information. So it's gotten into the process of pushing back and asking me for clarification versus making stuff up. Um, I just wanted to add that regarding what Eric said. So, is that an AI bot for responses to seller outreach scripts? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Joel, but I do have an AI receptionist that answers my phone calls if I'm not available, and then it will actually if people text in, which is happening more and more frequently, it will actually respond accordingly. And it's trained on not only my SOPs, but my lease agreements and a few other things. So it actually knows how to respond in our voice as a business. AI isn't that smart. If you don't know how to prompt and feed it information to give it context, it can be a monumental waste of time. To a certain extent, I would agree with you, Nick. It's all about the context, and I'm going to kind of get into like what makes a good prompt and what makes a bad prompt, because I think the people that have experienced negative situations with AI have given it extremely vague prompts and expected it to be some magical experience, and to just so if you're telling it to just launching ChatGPT and saying, "Hey, I'm starting a real estate business. Create all my SOPs." Expect slop. That's what's going to
Yeah.
happen. Expect slop. One of the things that I'm pointing out, because I'm going to, maybe it's a flex at this point because I'm working on this right now, is that I have two business partners, both of which hate dealing with the CRM. So I'm currently working on an agentic agent that will actually keep an eye on our calendar, and when they leave a property, it will actually text them and say, "Hey, I just saw you left your meeting with Eric. Do you have an update for me?" And then they can call or they can text or leave a voicemail or a message back, and then it will update the CRM on their behalf. So it's just a way in which to get some of these things done and be more consistent about it. So just going to glance through here. Is that bot created to make those responses? Yeah, well, it does help me make those responses, but frankly, after 10 years of doing this, I kind of know in my market what works and what doesn't. And so a lot of that is based on our knowledge, our FAQs, our SOPs, that type of thing, to give it the context to generate those responses, Joel. And if I have 5 hours to learn on my flip biz, what material or steps do you recommend? Thanks. Well, Josephine, that when you the AI has become one of the best learning tools that I've ever experienced myself. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing today, including the coding, if you want to call it agentic engineering or vibe coding, has come from me just simply asking Claude or ChatGPT to show me how to do it.
Mm. So
So
maybe, to that point, Jack, maybe, if you have an existing flip business, maybe the best steps would be to think about, what's currently taking up most of your time. What are the things in your business, in your workflow that are taking time? And, have that conversation with ChatGPT or Claude and ask it to identify places that AI could also improve your existing operations. One of the best ways that I've learned AI is through AI itself. There's a ton of videos available, obviously, on YouTube, a bunch of experts, but at the same time, we're all kind of learning this. And if you feel like you're behind now, I don't think you're that far behind. It's like it's all moving very fast. We're all kind of learning this a little bit together.
Joel Miller, I'm asking because I have a company wanting to charge all this money to build a bot to make all these responses, or have it created an agent in Claude to do the. Yeah, Joel, this is one of those things that there is going to be kind of a fine line here regarding like what your time is worth, right? Like, I don't know how big your company is and how big your outfit is. However, I have actually been advising some companies to think about hiring a young developer to and you can find some college kid that knows how to do some of this stuff, implement them, and try to hide some of that, find that some of that low-hanging fruit that Eric is suggesting. But depending on how much time you have, Joel, there isn't any reason why you probably couldn't build out a simple bot for a website. This is one of those things that chatbots were frankly expensive at one point. Now you can implement them in an afternoon. I mean, and trained on your material. So it's not as big of a lift as some companies might make out at this point. Can either AI analyze Zillow listings? Zillow, no, not exactly. Just because Zillow blocks bots at this point. So if you try to have it do that type of thing, the only way that I've been able to get that to work on a consistent level is, I don't want to go, we can go down that rabbit hole. But in summary, I have a second PC that runs an AI agent locally that then launches a browser and then navigates to Zillow on its own to find that information. So it actually acts like a user instead of what Zillow can actually detect, if that makes sense, Debbie. CMA report, inspection reports, and contractor estimates. They can all. This is where I've become a pain in the butt for some of my contractors, because I have been submitting their bids into ChatGPT, and as my data continues to grow, I have all of my bids from all of my contractors in a folder, so it actually starts to know regarding line items and work to be done. So it can flag now situations where a bid might be out of line, or I should be questioning specific aspects of a bid. It just has helped
massive
me.
value.
And it's simply save your bids into a folder and then point Claude to that folder.
So I know we've had a lot of questions come through, and it's great. There's been some really good questions. And Jack, I apologize because I know that you haven't gotten to all of your slides. If you have a couple of minutes, maybe we can go through one or two of those slides and wrap it up in the next 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, you bet. So this is where I was going to talk a little bit about how you can make better prompts. So, for example, a weak prompt would be write me a seller outreach email. A better prompt is you're a direct mail copywriter for distressed sellers. Write a 3-paragraph email for a probate lead in Fargo who inherited a 3-2 that needs work. Tone, empathetic, but direct. You can kind of see the big difference there. And it's all about providing that context associated with how you want it delivered. And here's a couple, a few prompts that you can use and that I use actually internally for some things. If you're on a Mac, for example, if you're using a solution that does like text expanders, I actually have these as text expanders. I just type in a couple of codes and it types this whole out for me, just to kind of make my typing more efficient. But I'll just kind of leave these on the screens. You can kind of read them to yourself. But these are type of prompts that I use and maybe would give you some direction there. And then AI agents, the next competitive edge. This is where I think, to be honest, some virtual assistant companies are going to get in trouble, because think of those low impact jobs that you might be hiring out for today. I have found that most of those jobs actually can be replaced by AI agentic agents at this point. I have one example where I implemented a small workflow for somebody not too long ago to help him with his marketing outreach. And it simply wrote a different type of post depending on the audience. Like LinkedIn is different than Facebook is different than Instagram, for example. And he let go two of his virtual assistants because this one 5-minute agentic agent was doing it now. So that's the type of impact you can have here. So I'm going to tell everybody starting this week, sign up for ChatGPT Plus, $20 a month. You're not going to get a bigger return on investment. I'm going to also tell you to sign up for Claude, which is another $20 a month. Those are the two. I kind of gave you a breakdown as to why or how to use them individually or differently. But if you haven't already, run one prompt this week. And I'm going to leave you with one big prompt. At the beginning of the year, because I kind of was just in ChatGPT at the time and had been using it for a week or for a whole year, I should say, I simply asked it, based on what you know about me, what am I missing in my business that could actually move the needle and have the biggest return on investment that I'm missing here today? And let it give you a response that actually will move the needle significantly for the rest of the year. So with that, I think we might have a couple minutes left, Eric. But if you'd like to learn more how you can actually implement some of these things, you can find me at realdealcrew.com. I do host two podcasts. One of them is Real Deal Cast, where I kind of nerd out and kind of actually, I'm going to start building in real time and showing people how to actually do some of this stuff. The other thing is that Real Deal Chat, where I actually interview people, and New Silver was recently on the show. So that was a great conversation. So, Eric, any outstanding questions, or did we kind of fly through the last bit of that pretty quick?
I know. I apologize, everyone. We had to wrap it up, but trust me, we could have probably gone on for another 5 hours. There's a massive amount, but I hope you got massive value from having Jack with us. Following up, definitely reach out to Jack. Wealth of knowledge. He understands the space. He understands our business, more importantly, because you can find people who understand AI, but finding people who understand our business, our industry, and actually making changes that improve the bottom line for your business is what really matters. So, it's easy to get distracted by the shiny objects when people are talking about AI, but always try and bring yourself back into what actually impacts your business. So, Jack, thanks for being with us. Thank you for everyone that joined, and we will send this out so that everyone can follow up and reach out if you have any more additional questions.
Thanks again, everyone.